Well, terrific. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julianne Jett, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the College of Medicine at Washington State University in Spokane. Julianne is investigating the relationship between stress biomarkers, alcohol biomarkers, and cognitive function in individuals with alcohol use disorders and serious mental illnesses. She's also supports and is involved with multiple clinical studies that utilize alcohol biomarkers to implement contingency management to reduce alcohol use in these same populations. And so Julianne's going to talk to us today about her experience with the utilization of her alcohol biomarkers and sensors. So Julianne, you're welcome to share your screen.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me join you all today. And I'm hoping to give you a really good overview of a new device for blood collection. It's called the TASSO device, and we've been using it in a telehealth format. So let me see if I can get this slide to listen. There we go. Just an idea of what we're going to go over today. The kind of study background where we started at was actually in person. And then due to COVID, we had to transition to telehealth. And so that's how this new device kind of came about. In addition to that, I'm going to talk to you about the blood spot cards and how that had some barriers for telehealth when we first transitioned, and then why we went and looked for the TASSO device, and give you an idea of how it works. And then do an overview of kind of how our telehealth visit goes using the TASSO device. And then the really fun stuff is talking about some of the ongoing data that we're collecting at the very end. So just real quickly, Judy already talked about contingency management a little bit, but we use this intervention in our experiments to help reduce alcohol use by using positive reinforcement. So essentially how it works is that we use an alcohol biomarker to verify alcohol use. And then if the cutoff level for our biomarker is met, meaning that they are below that cutoff, our individuals get a tangible reward. So we used to do physical like draws for prizes, and they would get to pick out what they wanted, small, medium, large, but now we've actually transitioned to e-gift cards with the same kind of financial allotment. And then with this positive reinforcement for reducing their drinking, we see this increased abstinence in individuals in our studies. Of course, though, if their biomarker is above the cutoff, then these rewards are withheld, and the individual has to earn back their rewards by reducing their drinking again. Let me get this out of the way. So for the study that I'm going to be talking about today, our biomarker is PeTH. And for many of the reasons that Judy already explained, we use this biomarker in part because of the specificity and the sensitivity, but also because the sampling window was longer. So it helped to reduce the number of samples that were needed from our participants. And because of that, made it easier for providers to use, and then also for our participants to stay in the study and use as well. And so the homolog that we're using for PeTH is the 16018-1. PeTH can actually have a detection window to up to 28 days. The homolog that we're using is around 6 to 8 days. We see about 7.5. So with that, we collected originally our blood samples using the blood spot card. And for this, of course, Judy also kind of explained it a little bit, was we lance the finger, then the participant will actually sit there and milk their finger to get enough blood to come out to the tip. And then they're instructed to put them in these nice spots on the spot card. After that, the spot card has to dry for a good amount of time. We were usually drying them for up to a week before we sent them to our team down in Texas that helped with the analysis. A lot of the pros of this method is that it is very cheap to conduct, and that the participants can collect their own samples, and it's also observable by the study staff. I will say, though, the caveat with that is that when we transitioned into telehealth, we found that it was very difficult for our participants to collect their blood samples correctly on their own. Doing it via telehealth and trying to problem solve with them how to collect their sufficient blood volumes via telehealth was very challenging, especially because of the age range in which we were allowing our participants to participate was up until 65. So older individuals too were having an even harder time with collecting their blood. But I think the biggest barrier outside of the problem solving was just simply we could not get consistent blood volumes. And so with that, we had to find a new way to collect the blood. We're kind of back at the starting point of what do we do if we can no longer collect samples in person. Like I said, because of COVID, we were having to transition to telehealth. And originally in this study, we were going to different housing programs within our community to meet individuals who were within those programs to help them collect their samples and participate in this experiment. So they were previously homeless, currently housed individuals. And our ability to access them came to zero because of COVID as well. And even whenever we did transition to telehealth, we were struggling with getting access to them. So one of the big steps in turning to telehealth format was also figuring out another way to recruit participants. And for that, we actually ended up turning to Instagram and Facebook and doing ads on Instagram and Facebook, and social media actually became the leading way that we recruited participants in this study. Okay, so with that, let's talk a little bit about the TASSO device. You can see it here pictured on the left. It's about 2 to 3 inches long. It's more 2 inches long. And you can see here, it has this red button and then this clear plastic area that has 4 cartridges in it. On the back of the device is an adhesive that the participant can peel off and stick it on their own arm to hold it in place. And then you just push the button to lance the skin and the cartridges start to fill up. Each cartridge can hold roughly 20 microliters. We've seen between 17 to 20 microliters whenever we analyze it down in Texas. And in addition to that, for each device, it comes in this nice package that you see here on the right. It has a TASSO device in it, an alcohol pad for cleaning the sample area, a Band-Aid for after sample collection, as well as a sample bag for sealing it up and protecting it during shipment, and a shipment box. Okay. So how the TASSO device itself works, participant will rub the upper arm vigorously for a few minutes before sampling to help bring blood to the surface. They'll then peel off the adhesive back and stick it on the arm. They'll press the red button, it'll lance the skin. And then pretty much right after that, you'll start seeing blood trickle down into the end right here. You can see it, the cartridges that are down there. It takes roughly 2 minutes to 5 minutes, depending on the individual, to fully fill up all 4 cartridges. And then after that, they simply peel it off of their arm. There is a clear plastic cover on the front of the cartridges. They peel off that clear front cover to allow drying, air drying, as the actual TASSO is shipped. And then they put it into their bag, they seal it up, they put it in the box, and they fill out the necessary information that's on the box. So with that, our telehealth procedure included sending these devices in advance. We will send 2 of the TASSO devices in case there is an error with one of them, operational error with one of them. So we send the 2 TASSO devices. In addition to that, we send a urine cup because we also collect we collect the urine to assess ETG levels. For assessing ETG, we actually use a dipstick for that. So the cutoff for our dipstick is 300 nanograms per mil. And then along with that, we have a brown bag to help participants discreetly discard of the urine cup. And we have a prepaid shipping bag. So it's really easy for them after this sample is collected, they just pack it up and they take it down to FedEx, or they can call FedEx for pickup. And everything's already pre-labeled for them. They don't have to worry about it. And that gets shipped down to Texas. The telehealth visit itself can happen on a weekly occurrence or a monthly occurrence, depending on which arm of the, which phase of the study that the individuals are in. We use a HIPAA compliant Zoom. And with that, like I said, we have our participants collect their urine privately, but then they do the actual dipstick test in front of the camera so that our study staff can help in directing how to use it appropriately, but also reading the outcome. This is a secondary outcome. It is not what our contingency management intervention is based on. That is definitely PETH. After they collect or test their urine with dipstick, they then verify the ID and the visit number that's on the TASSO device on camera. So they just hold it up to where our study staff can see it. They then go through the steps to collect their blood sample in front of our study staff. And then our study staff also watches them fill out all the information correctly and then seal it up in the bag. With that, our participants get a small incentive for when they ship the sample, just to help encourage them to get it in the mail faster. And then after that, once we have their results, we also give an incentive based on their intervention. Again, one of the nice things about the TASSO device is that there's no waiting. So before with the blood spot card, we had to wait a while before we could even send the sample down to Texas for analysis. With the TASSO device, it goes straight into a bag and it air dries as it's going down there. So it saves a lot of time. Our participants actually can get their results and know what their incentives are going to be within 3 to 5 days instead of taking longer than a week. So now for some of the fun, our ongoing telehealth data collection. With this, I really want to give a shout out to our collaborators down at the University of Texas Health San Antonio. This team has been key to us being able to do these studies. They are the ones who handle all of the bench work for this study. They were really great in helping us to establish a procedure for assessing PETH using the blood spot cards. And then whenever we transitioned to the TASSO device, they had to go through a whole new process of establishing a protocol and validating that protocol as well. So just to give you guys an idea, this goes for everything from the extraction of the blood from the TASSO cartridges to sample purification, as well as new analytical methods with establishing new standard curves and internal calibrators, things along those lines. So even before we could transition to using the TASSO device, there was a window of time that we had to kind of problem solve how to do the analytical part. So a lot of work before even collecting data. And then here's some of our data. I'm going to give you 3 examples. There's a lot going on here, but let me show you that over here on the left-hand side, we have nanograms per mil. That's going to be for our PETH samples and for our ETG. On the right-hand side, we have number of drinks. This is self-reported number of drinks. And then on the bottom here, we have day, which is the study day. So the day within the study that they're collecting samples. Our self-report is here in green. Our PETH sample is in blue and our ETG is in red. And I need to just specify again that our ETG is dichotomous. So it's either positive or it's negative. And that's why you see it either go at 300 or 0, 300 or 0. Whereas our PETH is continuous. You can actually see the levels change over time. And there's a lot of really cool examples within this one participant, but I was going to just show you on day 27 here. We had some recent drinking that was reported, and you do also see the PETH increase and that the ETG is positive. Then when we get you also see this decrease over time with reduced drinking here. So it was really nice. These are our weekly meetings right here in the beginning. So we had weekly sessions for a month, and you can really see that there's a lot of agreement between the self-report and the PETH and the ETG. That starts to change as we transition to our monthly visits. So as was mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of potential forgetfulness when it comes to trying to report what happened over the last month, unless our participants are writing down what they drink per day. We've had some variability with that. Some of our participants just rely on their recall, and other participants are actually keeping a diary, not because we've asked them to, but just because that's what they wanted to do for the study. So you can see here at day 56, we have again increase in reported drinking and this huge spike in PeTH compared to their previous samples. It's very likely that there is a part of that where Judy had mentioned it earlier, that when you drink, there can be at least initially a very large spike in PeTH that then decreases over time. But I also think that there was some poor recall on how much drinking was taking place, even just looking at the ETG, because they were reporting no drinking in there for a couple of days, and yet both of our biomarkers were positive. Before I change from this slide, I know it's a lot to look at. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay. Oh, I should mention, right here, this arrow is just to signify that was our baseline. We did take self-report leading up to baseline, but this is where we started collecting our PeTH in our ETG samples.
So the timing on these, I'm just thinking of the lag time for ETG and PeTH. Since this is kind of weekly, these are somewhere between 4 and 7 days, apart. There's we should be cognizant of that as well. Remind me what how quickly the metabolites go away. We should expect to see change, like within a week to 2 weeks, or what's the half-life for these measures look like?
So for the homolog of PeTH that we're looking at, it's 7 days, 7.5 days. And so it really does depend too on how high their levels were to start with, how quickly you're going to see this dissipate over time. But the half-life for the homolog that we're looking at is 7.5 days. And then again, too, with ETG, it depends on how heavy the drinking is, but that can be anywhere for 2 to 5 days, depending on levels of drinking.
Great. So this is a good resolution to look at that. That's great.
Yeah, both measures, and also look at our self-report over time. So with this individual, it kind of looks a little bit cleaner in some ways, but you can see here that they had no reported drinking for a number of days, and yet you still do see that our PeTH stays elevated for a number of days after that. The cutoff that we were using for our contingency management was 20 nanograms per mil, and just within the parameters that the team down in Texas has established, that 20 nanograms per mil would indicate absolutely no drinking prior to sampling. And so what we can see here is, again, nice agreement with a self-report to our ETG and our PeTH. But then again, over here, we see that after recent drinking, of course, this is a number of days, we have a negative ETG, which makes sense, but yet still you see our PeTH is coming down. So again, just keep in mind that the first 4 weeks is a weekly measurement. And then after the first 4 weeks, we transition to a monthly measurement. So you start to see kind of more space between, I would say, I guess, more lag between accuracy with the ETG and with the PeTH as samples go on, and with agreement, that's the word, agreement between self-report, ETG, and PeTH as the samples go on. PeTH is definitely a great indicator if you're going to be assessing over a longer duration of time.
Julian, is number of drinks per day assessed every day on these later terms? Like, are these blank areas no drinks, or just that it wasn't assessed?
That's a great question. These blank areas are where the participants said they didn't drink at all.
Okay.
So, but is their recall over the last month?
Yeah.
So they're essentially recalling the last week, 2 weeks, and then not recalling prior to that. So you know,
Getting tired of asking the questions as Tor
right.
as
I
Tor
definitely
commented on. Yeah.
exactly. They're like, man, I can tell you for the last 2 weeks what I drank, but I don't know before that. So that's definitely where something like some of our participants, like I was saying earlier, just they started keeping track of it. And so, excuse me, we have some better self-reporting in those areas, depending on the individual. So we'll have to think about that as we move forward and actually look at analysis to assess agreement between all the measures. And then this is the last participant I wanted to show you for today. This individual very much was dedicated to doing, yeah, it's kind of like our poster child here, doing the contingency management. They were in the contingency management arm. And actually this individual in the span of the study went from drinking very heavily to getting a new job, getting married, and becoming pregnant, all within the span of 6 months for the study, and really attributed a lot of that to the contingency management intervention, which is really great to get that kind of feedback. But you can see here that they had very heavy reported drinking leading up to their baseline. They were easily eligible for the study based on their PeTH results. And then after that, quickly stopped drinking. And you can see that their ETG was negative to represent the time course after ending drinking, whereas the PeTH slowly decreased over time. We do have this funny little positive ETG here. We very much find the PeTH results to be accountable here, especially because it follows a steady curve down. I think that this was just a faulty ETG reading. Which can easily happen with the dipsticks, especially on telehealth. We have run into that. So just to give you kind of like a take home with this TASSO device, the pros of it is that it's very user-friendly and it's low pain tolerance for the participants. This was also studied in a USDA study looking at doping in athletes. They did a telehealth format for that using the TASSO device, and all of the athletes preferred it over the fingerprint procedure simply because of the low pain that they experienced and the ease at which it was to take samples. It's also a relatively reliable blood collection method. We've had a lot of consistency. I think we have now over 200 samples that we've collected with them. A lot of consistency in the volume that is being collected. And then in addition to that, it's extremely easy to view the blood collection during telehealth. We can just sit there and actually watch it fill up as the participant is collecting it. It's also easier for our staff to problem solve if there are any issues with blood collection. And the nice thing too is that we don't need any kind of medical assistance to collect the blood. It's very user-friendly and self-sufficient. And then it can also be shipped immediately due to the ability to dry it as it's shipping. We do have run into a couple cons with using this device. It's not all bells and whistles. One of it is it's extremely expensive. The academic cost for the device is $25 per unit. So if you have a faulty one, or if a participant uses it not correctly and you have issues with collecting samples as a consequence of that, or they don't come to their sessions and you lose them entirely, it is a big chunk of money that you're losing along with it. There's also been some lot issues that we've experienced in the last month, I would say. We haven't had it in the last year, but in the last month, we had some lot issues where for some reason, devices from the specific lot, we had just problems. Yeah, like collecting samples. But the company is very accommodating, and they sent us new ones, and they're problem solving so that they can prevent the issue from happening in the future.
Fantastic. Jillian, I have a question. What's the what's the wound like from the TASSO device on the arm? Is it equivalent to a finger stick? Is it a slightly larger anticoagulant coated like metal blade? What's it look like for our subjects who, you know, may be a little adverse to pain and pain and blood?
Right, right. It's very much like the finger prick. It's a very small lance. I wish that you can actually go onto the website and watch blood collection on the website with a video, but it will show you the wound there. It is a very small prick. It's not painful at all. I would equate it to a lot with like, there are ways for diabetics to check their insulin levels using a similar device in the arm. And so if you're familiar with that at all, it's pretty much the same.
Well, there are a lot less nerve endings in
That's true
flat
too.
skin areas than your fingertip, which is highly innervated.
Right,
that's
right.
great.
You can understand why the athletes who are using their hands to do the sports that they're doing was very happy to be able to use the arms instead of something that had to be using their fingertips.
Fantastic, great. Well, we'll also have Julie Hahn available for questions and discussion on this technology. Actually, now I'd like to introduce Dr. Yan Wang, who's an assistant professor of epidemiology at the University of Florida. She's a core faculty member of the Southern HIV and Alcohol Research Consortium, SHARC. She's also the core lead of the Consortium for Medical Marijuana Clinical Outcomes Research Study, which is based out of Florida, and has a current NIAAA funded R21 project to validate some of these wrist-worn biosensors. I'm really excited to hear about this. Yan, would you like us to show your slides, or would you like to have control?
I can do either way. Maybe you can just pull it up if you already have it. First, I want to thank Judy for inviting me, and also thank you, Edwin, for organizing the slides. So my talk will be focusing on transdermal alcohol biosensors and some of the applications we used in our research project. Can we advance? So as Judy mentioned, there are different products that are available in the market these days. So basically what transdermal alcohol biosensors do is that they detect about 1% of alcohol excreted through the skin. And they produce the reading that's called transdermal alcohol concentration, or TAC. So the main goal of having these biosensors is really to have a tool that can be non-invasive and continuously and objectively measure alcohol use. So as Judy mentioned, there is the ScramCam, which is an ankle bracelet. And also there are two available for research purchase biosensor that are wrist-based. One of them is Backtrack Skin, and the other is Milo sensors. I'm not going to talk about Milo sensors in this presentation because I tried their early products, and they actually require the change of cartridge every 24 hours. And I decided it's not what we really wanted to use in our research for continuous monitoring. So I'm aware of their recent progress, that they have a couple of rounds of NIAAA SBIR fundings to develop their sensors. And they have this newer version, which is in the picture here, but I'm just not gonna talk about a lot of their products, and I will focus on the Backtrack. Next, please. So yeah, just a little bit about this ScramCam before we totally dismiss this for research use. So as Judy mentioned, it was originally designed for law enforcement. And it has been actually widely validated in research and used in both research studies and interventions. And some of the strengths of the device is that, as you can see, it can be locked on to your ankle, and there is a temper detection algorithm that researchers can actually see temper attempts by the participants, and they can determine whether they trust the data or not. And there is also established algorithm for drinking detection either by the company itself and also by Barnett's group, and also some other group have their own criteria for drinking detection as well. But there is this TestMac macro you can use for processing the data. Basically give you a very nice output for the peak of the TAC reading area under the curve, which is supposed to correlate with the volume of alcohol consumption. And some of the limitations are also obvious. I don't think a lot of people want to wear this just for a research purpose. There is high cost associated with the device itself. It's $1,500, and there's about $5 to $8 daily fee, depending on how you negotiate with the company. And then there is obviously stigma associated with it because of the law enforcement application. And also it samples fairly sparsely every 30 minutes, and that could be less desirable for researchers like me who want to get a more fine-grained look at the drinking episode. Next, please. So this is just an example data. This person is in the monitoring period for 11 days, and this is their drinking data, how it looks like. And there's this TAC reading from the system. And then yeah, when you zoom in, it looks more like a curve, not just spikes. So this is really crunched together. Next, please. So we actually looked at whether some social demographic and clinical factors associated with the TAC readings generated from the SCRAM sensor. This is based on data from a large UL1 project that use the SCRAM biosensor as a contingency management tool. So we actually didn't find a lot factors that's actually, in addition to number of drinks, that's associated with the TAC value. So the AST is a liver enzyme that we found has an impact on the TAC reading. And then also biological sex, as you can imagine, is associated with the TAC AUC. So just want to bring that up because there are individual differences that may have an impact on the TAC reading in addition to like how much you drink. All right, so basically we have been working with Backtrack since they won the 2016 Wearable Biosensor Challenge. We have been waiting for their products for a couple of years. It took forever for them to have the early production version. And then this is already an improved version from the very beginning. And then if you can advance to next. So I got this R21 project I called AWARE study to validate the early production version of the skin biosensor. So we had both lab session and field use to test the reliability, validity of the sensor. And with the larger project in mind, we eventually want to use the biosensor for continuous monitoring to provide individualized feedback to people and to give them a tool that they can self-monitor in the real life and eventually improve their health outcomes. So next, please. So this is what this biosensor looks like. So on the left here is the older version we tested in R21. As you can see, it looks like a Fitbit, not Fitbit, but a fitness tracker in general. So the earlier version is not waterproof, but the newer version on the right here is actually shower proof. So you can take it to shower, but not swim or bath with it. The battery life, so based on what I observed now with this one, it looks like it takes about 20% of its battery over 24 hours. So I would say a few days, 4 to 5 days should be a pretty decent estimation of the battery life. The memory space, previously it says it holds 48 hours of data, but with the new version, it actually uploads data in near real time. So there's really no need for the device itself to hold the data. You can access the data from their data portal in real time. So you can basically see participants' data as they come in. So the charging time, 1 hour, yeah, it's about 1 hour, you can get everything charged. Next, please. So this is the older version of their app. So it only works with iOS system. So if your participants don't have iPhone, you need to provide them an iPhone to work with the device. That's currently what we're doing with some of our participants. Luckily, nobody has lost the study phone so far. So we had some good luck with that. And then, so the device itself is, the Skin app itself is mainly for data transmission purpose. And the older version actually had this display of tech reading, but it's in the original unit, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So even if your participants are looking at their own data, they will not be able to make sense of it. So some researchers don't want their participants to look at their own data to avoid reactivity to the monitoring. So the latest version of their app actually don't have any data display, as you can see later. So the data portal actually provides data downloading, and it includes the account, which is basically an email address, device ID, the serial number, timestamp, tech reading, and there is also motion sensor reading and temperature readings from the device. Next, please. So this is a newer version of the software. So it is actually much more improved compared to their previous version. It gives you like a step-by-step guide on how to connect a device to your phone. So basically you can see you pair this with your phone, gives you a little bit about how the device works. This is the sensor part. And then it shows you how you're supposed to wear the device. It should go under your wrist and not on top of it, like the watch. And then basically it shows you the device is connected, and it says last time it synced, it's a few moments ago. And you can also tell the battery life by click on the upper right corner, the icon there. And that's basically it. You don't get to see the readings as the previous version. Next, please. So this is the researcher portal. You can see different participants' data, and you can apply different filters. So you can basically just type in one participant's email address and just download that person's data, or you can just download everybody together. So you have a dashboard that you can see who is in your study, and so the readings is the screen you see right now, and data exports. So this R21 AWARE study, as I mentioned, we had a lab session to validate the skin device, and also a field validation, which is basically EMA plus the skin sensor in the field for 2 weeks. I'm not gonna go into any details. If you're interested, we can always come back to more details. But I just want to share some of the findings. If you can advance to next slide. So this is just one example of how the skin readings compare to the breathalyzer readings in the lab. So we give participants 3 beers in a row, and this is a male participant. So as you can see, as they proceed with their drinking, their tech reading from the skin biosensor also elevated. And then over time, it kind of returned to baseline. So this is almost like a very perfect scenario where you almost see the peak of the tag aligns with the breast alcohol concentration, but usually there's a delay of the peak tag compared to the breathalyzer alcohol reading. So next, please. So we compared the peak tag and the peak BRAC readings in the lab. So we actually had 2 sessions for each participant, and we noticed that for the first lab session, we actually had a non-significant correlation between the peaks. And we suspect the reason is that for the earlier drinking sessions, we actually had a lot of software issues with the early production version. That could be some data quality issue, but for lab session 2, which took place a little bit later for most of the participants, we actually see a pretty good correlation between the peak tag and the peak BRAC readings. Next, please. And this is an example of 2-week readings of the biosensor reading in the field. So on the top panel here is the actual reading of the tag. As you can see here, there are some obvious drinking episodes, as you can see. And this is the call out actually shows a whole drinking episode if you zoom in the data, because 14 days is a lot of data and you can barely see the curve well. And then when you look at the temperature and the motion data, you can make inference of whether the participant is wearing the device or not. For example, if you see a deep dip of the temperature, and also almost no motion, that is a good indicator that the person is probably not wearing the device. But these are all kind of in ideal scenario. Sometimes data are more noisy than you expect, and it's not always going to be like very clear when the participant is drinking or not, if it's very noisy. But yeah, so it's getting there. And next, please. So this is what we have from the field test. So we collected self-reported number of drinks in the EMA, and also we compared that with the skin, the tag, peak tag value from the skin biosensor. And as you can see here, actually there is a pretty decent correlation between the peak tag and number of drinks we collected by self-report. Next. So some challenges with the tag, transdermal biosensor in general is that it's actually not directly translatable to blood alcohol concentration. And there is a lot of interpersonal differences and intrapersonal differences that can impact tag readings. And some of the work that Susan Luchek and her colleagues, and also recently Catherine Fairbairn and her group, they are trying very hard to figure out how to convert tag readings to blood alcohol concentration so that we can have a more classic gold standard value to compare across individuals. But this is a very big challenge to take on. And I know Catherine Fairbairn has recently received an R01 to just do that using machine learning approach. So yeah, there's that challenge. And next, please. So I don't know if I should keep going or because I have, yeah, okay. So instead of like really thinking about figuring out the blood alcohol concentration, some recent publication came out trying to look at transdermal sensor features, so just a TEC reading features, and look at their association with alcohol-related consequences. So this way, we're not looking at converting to BAC first and then look at its association with other outcomes, but directly looking at TEC readings and their association. So basically what the authors found is that higher peaks, larger area under the curve, faster absorption rate and faster elimination rates were significantly predictive of alcohol-related consequences after adjusting for self-reported drinking. So this actually suggests we can maybe utilize TEC readings, the features of TEC readings in our research beyond converting them to BAC readings. Next, please. So we wrote a commentary on this paper and suggest that maybe just in the future, we can think more about integrating TEC with real-time data on alcohol use that collected from EMA and try to look more into the link between TEC reading, drinking behavior, and related outcomes. And we need a lot of data to actually accomplish the better understanding of this. So next, please. And we have 2 new biosensor projects funded. So both of them involve, so both of these are PO1 projects, and both of them include one project that will use the skin biosensor. So the first project here, less is more, is still a contingency management project that we will use the skin biosensor as a contingency management monitoring tool, in addition to mobile breathalyzer. And the second project here, we want to use it as a self-monitoring tool, but we also wanted to use machine learning algorithm to actually figure out what's the best way to detect self-reported drinking, detect drinking using skin biosensor. And next, please. I don't know, I put too many slides probably, sorry. Yeah, so just to wrap up, pros and cons of wrist biosensors. Obviously, it's more attractive design. It's more acceptable than the scram bracelet. The battery life, if you think about your Apple Watch, is pretty decent, a few days. So it also provides continuous sampling of drinking data. The weaknesses, obviously, there is a delay compared to breath alcohol concentration. It cannot be locked on. So if you are doing contingency management, it could be a challenge. And of course, data quality depends on participant compliance. If they're not wearing it appropriately, it might be an issue. And always there is data analysis and interpretation challenge. I think that's it. Yeah, so just thank my collaborators and the funding agencies for supporting the project. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Yan, very, very much.